I want to start by telling you a conversation I had recently. In fact, it was last week with my with my hairdresser. We were talking about COVID and how it's impacting our lives and how it's impacted her business and she was it's for those of you who can go to your hairdresser. It's a hassle for them. They can only see so many clients and they have to wash everything. And so she was talking about, we were commiserating a little bit about COVID. And then she said something to me. She said, Sandy, um, what I noticed though about you, even through all of this, is you're happy. You seem to be happy all of the time, or happy a lot when I see you. And she said, how come you're so how come you're so happy? Now, at first, people ask you questions and they don't really want an answer. I wasn't sure at first, but then I could tell she really wanted an answer. She really wanted to know why I was so happy all of the time. And so I told her, I said, look, when I was in my 20s or late 20s, I had a realization. And my realization was I could have circumstances in my life. And one day I was unhappy. And the next day I had the exact same circumstances and I was unhappy. I realized that there was something other than circumstances that determined whether I was happy or not. And then I realized that I could realize that, that there was a capacity in me that allowed me to see things new and differently. And once I realized both of those things, things changed for me. I wasn't as victimized by my circumstances or by other people. And I found that I had an ability to choose how I felt. Now, lest you think, wow, how did you have those realizations at 27? That's pretty amazing. Well, while the realizations were absolutely mine and they came from me, I had the opportunity to hear someone. I had a teacher. His name was Sydney Banks. We'll talk about him perhaps later in the program, but he shared some things with me that when I heard them, at first they didn't make a lot of sense. They resonated with me, but I didn't, they sounded like good ideas or new ideas, as Robin said. But at some point I realized what he was saying. And it changed my life. And now, 40 years later, it's still changing my life. And I'm going to do my best to share with you what I heard from Sydney Banks. The trouble or the challenge that I have, that all four of us in Inside Principles has, is that we as human beings have a tendency to look out at what's happening or what just happened. It's understandable. That's where life looks like it's happening. You know, you're right now, you're seeing me. I'm out here. But am I really? Where are you actually seeing me? You're actually seeing me inside your mind. In fact, there'll be times when you don't see me, even though I'm here, because you'll be thinking of something else. Gee, when is it time for lunch? And I will disappear from your life, even though I don't really disappear. So it's a challenge because the action is invisible. We have a tendency to notice the visible. You get my incredible artwork here. There's something going on in here, in this invisible diamond, that we're going to do our best to make visible to you, even though it's impossible because it's invisible. But we're going to talk about it and try to describe it. But you're going to have to bear with us because we are describing the invisible. But it's the invisible that's actually creating our experience of life. Even though we tend to pay attention to the visible. We pay attention to the events, we pay attention to circumstance, we pay attention to people. But the action is actually happening here. And the action is actually determined by a set of principles, a set of scientific principles that if you see them, you get to be less of a victim of circumstances and events and people. And you have more freedom to live and feel the way you want to. I'm going to really briefly share these principles, talk about them really briefly. We will go into them in more depth when we meet in February. So there are three principles, and I use the word principle very deliberately because principles are another word for them would be absolutes or constants or truths, like gravity. Gravity is a principle. And I'm using the word universal principles because these principles apply across the board, like gravity. Anywhere on Earth, gravity applies. Any human being, no matter where they're raised, where they were born, no matter how old they are, what ethnicity they are, what race they are, what gender they are, doesn't matter. These principles are working behind the scenes to create our moment-to-moment experience of life. But again, they're invisible. The first principle that we'll be talking about is a principle we call the principle of mind. Now, again, remember, I'm describing the invisible, so don't get hung up on my words. These are just words we've picked. Don't worry about the words. Try to get what I'm pointing to. If you want to use a different word, go right ahead. The principle of mind is pointing to the fact, Ken talked about this already this morning, There is an energy behind that makes life possible. There's an intelligent energy that makes life possible. And we're a part of that energy. I say it's intelligent because, and for me, it's much easier to see this in nature. When you're out in nature, you'll notice there's a rhythm and a harmony and an intelligence in nature. You can observe it. You see animals operating via instinct. Those of you who are really into nature, you'll discover that even the plants and the trees have an intelligence. There's a wonderful book I read recently. It's called The Hidden Life of Trees. Fascinating book. It's written by a German, but it's been translated into English. He talks about how trees communicate with one another. Now, they don't talk, but they have a way of communicating and warning each other. So it's easy to see this intelligence. I see, I have a dog, and it's easy to see the intelligence in my dog. That intelligence doesn't belong to anybody. It's a formless energy that allows us to live life, to be alive. You might see it operating in your body. Your body can heal itself. You cut yourself, your body heals. You don't do it. Your body knows what to do. That principle is running your mind. The principle of consciousness. Principle of consciousness is pointing to the fact that you're awake, you're aware. You have awareness. You come into the world aware. You don't make yourself aware. You're going to be aware of something always. And you can be aware of the intelligence of your mind. That's what happens every time when you describe those moments when you just knew what to do. Your consciousness was making you aware of that intelligence. That capacity to be aware is built into the system. The principle of thought. You're a thinker. You were born a thinker. You were born with the capacity to think, with the capacity to form images in your head. Again, these are happening behind the scenes. These principles work together every moment of your life to bring you your experience. Let me use an analogy, a very simple analogy. And I'm going to date myself here because I'm going to ask you to, hopefully some of you have seen a movie projector before the digital age. You know, a lot of you came around during the digital age, so maybe in history books, you saw a projector. And you'll remember the projector has an energy source. It's plugged into electricity. It has a light source. And it has film. And as long as it's plugged in, and as long as the light works, and as long as there's film, there's going to be an image projected on the screen. Whatever is on the film will get projected on the screen. That's just the way a projector works. If you have film of a war scene, that's what's going to get projected on the screen. If you have film of a boy playing with his dog, that's what's going to get projected on the screen. There's no other way around it. You're not going to have a film of a war scene and see a dog and a boy playing. It doesn't, projectors do not work that way. Well, to use this analogy to explain how the principles work, the principle of mind would be the equivalent to the electricity, the power source, what makes the whole thing run. Without it, nothing works. Without it, there's no life. Consciousness is like the light. It enlightens the film. Without light, there would be nothing on the screen. Thought, the principle of thought, is like the film. Whatever we're thinking in the moment, consciousness lights it up. And the whole system is powered by mind. And what gets on the screen is our reality. It's what looks real to us. Now, this is happening every single moment of your life. You can't stop it, but you can understand it. And that's what we're trying to help you see. Because once you understand it, you find yourself in a reality that is not working for you, you'll potentially remember that the reality is actually being created by these principles. It's happening from the inside out. It's not coming at you. It's coming through you. So, going back, what's in that mystery diamond are these principles. Where's the power? You'll see the power is not here. It's not in the visible. It's not in what's happening. It looks like it is because that's what we see. But we're asking you to just reflect, just look, just try on for size. The possibility that the action is actually happening behind the scenes in the invisible. And that the power of the human mind actually lies here. And that's such good news for humanity. Because if the power truly did exist in experiences and events and other people, if that was true, then we would spend X amount of our time victims. And the other part of our time dependent. So when bad things were happening, we'd have to be victims of it. And when good things were happening, we'd have to be dependent on it. So we would need those good things in order to be happy. But the truth is, the mind does not work that way. It was designed perfectly with the power on the inside.